Hey guys, it's Sydney from SimiCakes.com and welcome back to another Simi Isomalt Basics video. Today is all about pulling ice malt. So it's getting the ice malt from a liquid to a solid. So it's the technique of pulling and folding in cool air to create more of a clay that we can actually sculpt with. We can do traditional pulled ice malt techniques, we can do tons of sculpting techniques, and you can also blow the ice malt from here. So pretty much anything that you want to hand sculpt is all going to start here. So let's get started. So I'm going to be working on a silicone mat today. So you can see this beautiful Silpat mat that I have here. The silicone mat is going to be vital. Now you can pull on this Silpat mat, but I actually prefer to pull on a slightly thinner silicone baking liner. So this is the one that we have on our website, but you can use any thin silicone baking mat. And what that is going to do is it's just going to be a little bit more flexible, and it also doesn't have the pattern that Silpat mats have. So it's going to release easier and it's going to be nice and smooth. So I prefer to work on this silicone mat rather than a Silpat, but you could use either. Now you'll notice that I'm leaving my Silpat mat underneath my silicone baking mat. That is because I want a little bit of a buffer between the ice malt that gets very, very hot and the table so that the table doesn't heat up and insulate too much heat. If the table gets too hot, what can happen is it can heat up the silicone mat that you're pulling on, and silicone has pores just like skin. So once they get hot, they're going to open up, and if the ice malt gets stuck down in the pores, it may not want to release. That is okay. If that happens, it's no big deal. Just remove your excess ice malt, and then you can wash off the mat with a little bit of cool water. The ice malt almost jumps off. It doesn't always stick in the same spot. It's really just about that heat. So if you're working on a metal table like me, or a regular just a countertop, or like a plastic table, a fold table, then those are going to insulate a ton of heat and it can make it a little bit too warm. Now, if you're working on a stone table, a marble or a granite, those get very cold, right? So the mat, I'm still going to leave there because it kind of does the opposite. It keeps the mat that you're working on from getting too cold against the stone and cooling off too quickly. So the first thing that we're going to do, of course, is melt our ice malt. So I'm using my Simi Isomalt tiles. These are pre-cooked and ready to use, so all you have to do is pop them in the microwave for 30 seconds and then 15-second intervals until it's a liquid. Now remember, ice malt gets very, very hot. It's about 300 degrees when you're working with it in a liquid form, so make sure that you are wearing your gloves to protect your hands. I've been working with this for so long that my hands are no longer heat sensitive, and it's easier for me to demonstrate without the gloves for more detail. But I highly recommend wearing your gloves when working with ice malt. Once my ice malt is melted, I'm just pouring it out onto my silicone mat. Just pouring a puddle. You don't have to prep the mat with anything. You don't have to grease it or powder it. You just pour the ice malt right out. Then I'm going to slowly start folding in cool air. So I'm going to fold the mat over end to end, kind of press it and tap it lightly just to make sure the ice malt is stuck, but make sure that no ice malt squishes out the ends of the mat. That's very important. Then you're going to peel the mat very, very slowly back away from itself. And then we're just going to repeat that over and over in alternating directions. So I'm not folding the same way every single time. I'm going from different angles, and that's going to keep the ice malt all consistent. So I'm making sure as I'm folding to go very, very slow. You don't want the ice malt to splatter on anyone or anything. So just go nice and slow here at first while it's in a liquid form, and you're going to keep alternating which ways you're folding. You want to make sure as you are folding your puddle in half that you are folding it edge to edge. So one edge of the puddle is going to fold directly onto the opposite edge of the puddle. So I'm not folding past it, I'm not folding before it. I'm just trying to line it up pretty evenly, and that's going to keep it consistent. If you spread it out too thin, it's going to cool way too quickly. I'm not following a pattern to this, I'm not counting, I really just go by texture because there is a lot of variables depending on how cool your room is, if you're under a draft, what kind of table you're working on, and how much ice malt that you're using. The more ice malt that you pour out, the longer it's going to take because it's holding in more heat. You'll see the edges start to cool and thicken first, and that's good. It's going to look like a big mess at first, but I promise it all comes together. So that's our goal here, is to get all the ice malt to pull together into one ball, kind of like dough. Once it's ready, it will all come together and it will stop sticking. That's what this is going to do. So by the time we pick up our ice malt, it is not going to be sticky like it is in the beginning. Now that the ice malt has gotten a little bit thicker and it's out of the splatter zone, I like to call it, when it feels like it's more of a solid than a liquid, I'm going to go a little bit faster, and that's going to help the mat release from the ice malt much, much easier. If you go too slow and you keep folding in tons of air into it, you can overpull it. So the goal to this is to get it to release off of the mat without being sticky. So with your gloved hands, if you try and pick it up and it's just still sticking to the mat, sticking to your gloves, that means that it's still too hot. Keep folding it until you can easily pick it up. Another thing I like to do is move my ice malt on the mat over a few inches every few folds, and that will just further keep any heat from insulating by moving it over to a cool spot on your table. From there, we're going to start pulling it. So this is where the name pulled sugar comes in, or pulled ice malt. We are going to fold in cool air because when you first pick it up, it's still going to be super hot and super soft and pliable. Nothing that you sculpt into it would hold its shape. So I'm going to fold in some cool air, and that's just cooling it off even further. It's essentially the same thing as what we were just doing on the mat. We're folding in cool air and we're thickening and hardening the texture. Now it does just take a little bit of practice to get this to where you want it, so don't worry, you're going to get a feel for it the more and more you work with it. But basically I'm just stretching and folding until the ice malt feels a little bit firmer than when I first picked it up. Now you can also see the air inside the ice malt if you're using a transparent color. You can see those beautiful streaks and that beautiful satin finish that ice malt gets when it's pulled. That's all the air that's mixed in. So you want to make sure as you're stretching and folding, you're keeping it very consistent as far as there's not thin spots and thick spots in your tube. And you're also folding it in one direction. You're not twisting this up and you're not kneading it. You want to make sure you're folding it onto itself the same direction every single time. And then in between folding, I like to cool it by rolling it a little bit. This cools it off without folding too much air in. Now, if you over pull this, what's going to happen is if you just keep cooling and adding more and more air, eventually it's going to get cool, right? It's going to get rock hard. Now, if that happens, it's not a big deal because ice malt is super forgiving. Remember that you can remelt that completely back down to a liquid in the microwave, or you can reanimate it just a little bit on your mat. So fold your mat in half and put it in the microwave, 5-second intervals only, until it gets pliable again. You may have to fold the mat a little in case you get warmer spots or more liquid spots, but that way you don't have to start completely from scratch. Once your ice malt is pulled, I'm going to put it underneath a heat lamp. So I use a 250 watt bulb. If you've seen my videos or taken my classes before, you'll see that I have a stand that I hook it on. The hood is just like a chicken or a reptile brooding hood. You can get the whole thing at Walmart. The bulb is usually on the next aisle. Altogether, it's about 15 bucks. I just like to use the nice clear bulb, and I will just hang that onto my stand that I build. Now, I do have another YouTube video on how I do that, so if you're interested in seeing the exact height that I hang it to and everything about that, I will put the link in the description below in my YouTube video, but you can also just clip this to your overhead cabinet, just clip it to the side, and then you can raise or lower it depending on how warm you would like this to be. Now, a couple things to remember when working with pulled ice malt is that it's kind of the exact opposite as working with fondant gum paste modeling chocolate, where the more you knead those, the softer they get. With this, the more you knead it, the more you touch it, the more air gets into it, the harder it gets. So, of course, with practice, you're going to get faster and faster, which will help, but you want to make sure that you don't overwork this. If you're pulling and pulling and pulling, then you're not going to have very much time to work with your piece. So we want to make sure that we're not over pulling this as we work, and remember that you can re-soften it whenever you need to with that microwave. Another thing is going to be not kneading cooler pieces back into the warm ice malt underneath your lamp. So if you are pulling a whole bunch of ice malt and putting it underneath your heat lamp and just cutting pieces off to use it, any excess pieces that you had cut off, you don't want to mix those back into the ice malt under the lamp, because if they've been touched or out of the lamp for longer than the other ball of ice malt that's nice and warm and pliable, they are not going to balance each other out if you knead it back in. It's just going to create lumpy ice malt, and nobody wants that. So basically just take those pieces and put them into your silicone bowl and remelt it back down to a liquid to make sure everything is nice and consistent. The lamp is really good for keeping things warm that are already warm, but it's not going to reheat them. So make sure you use the torch if you want to reheat individual pieces, or pop them in the microwave. Are you ready to get started in Isomalt? Check out our brand new Simi Isomalt Basics Kit, complete with everything you need to get started. Available now at simicakes.com. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to tag me in pictures if you make any pulled Isomalt pieces. I always love seeing it. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to message me. You can email, Facebook message, Instagram message, call, anything. All of my links to all my social media will be in the description below, and I will see you next time. Keep life sweet. Don't forget to watch the first video in this series where I talk all about exactly what Isomalt is and how to prevent bubbles in your Isomalt pieces. Up now on my YouTube channel. And also make sure to subscribe to my channel and follow me on social media to be the first to know when the next episode of my Isomalt Basics series comes out. Until next time, keep life sweet.